It's time we talk about the relationship between the U.S. and Israel.
We stand with Israel.
I love Israel. I love Israel.
The bond between our two countries is unbreakable.
The eternal friendship.
Relationship is very important.
We are you, you are us.
It's the relationship that's always been super close and super controversial at the same time. But recently, it's getting more attention after Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th and the beginning of the war between Israel and Gaza.
The U.S. is moving a tremendous amount of firepower and manpower as a show of support to Israel.
A significant increase in American support.
Basically comparable to a blank check.
No questions asked, not even a...
Today on BTD, we will decode this relationship layer by layer, which dates back 75 years, starting May 14, 1948, which dates back to some say controversial, some say codependent, but we say it's complicated. Slate, the beginning. There are four major things that will help explain what's behind it, what has kept this going, and where it is now. The first thing that we should know is that the U.S. has supported Israel from the very beginning. Israel declared itself a state in 1948 on land that had previously been Palestine under British rule. More than 700,000 Palestinians fled or were forced to evacuate, and the U.S. was the first country to recognize Israel. President Truman was the first to do it just after 11 minutes of its creation. The idea of establishing a nation for Jewish people had been gaining momentum for decades. It was the main goal of a movement called Zionism, which started in the late 1800s. Zionists believed that a Jewish homeland was the only way to save Jews, who were then suffering from persecution around the world for centuries. The United States supported the idea of Zionists from the start. There was a great sympathy for the Zionist project throughout the 1930s and 1940s, and after the Holocaust, that was combined with enormous sympathy for the genocide that was carried out against the Jewish people in Europe. And that helped pave the way for Western, particularly American support for the establishment of Jewish state. Now, something both the US and Israel highlight a lot is the idea of shared values. It's a bit hard to pin down exactly what those values are, but many US politicians talk about Israel as the only democracy in the Middle East. A lot of people might criticize this idea that both the US and Israel are beacons of democracy. But whatever you may think of this, it's a narrative which both of these countries like to emphasize. According to many other powerful leaders, the next point in line is that the US and Israel are tagged as strategic partners from time to time. So what does that mean? Well, basically that they both get something concrete out of the relationship that serves their national interests. And that really started with the Cold War. That's the period after the Second World War until the late 1980s, when the US and the Communist Soviet Union were competing to be the dominant global superpower. And that rivalry played out in the Middle East too, especially Egypt, Israel's neighboring country. Keep in mind that 5 Arab countries, including Egypt, went to war with Israel right after it was created. During that time in the 1950s, also Israel asked the US for weapons. It said it needed weapons to maintain military edge over hostile Arab neighbors. And in 1962, President Kennedy, under his rule, finally agreed to this. Kennedy literally laid the foundation for what would later become a closer relationship, and one that had a strategic dimension. That increased exponentially after the 1967 war, when Israel not only defeated Arab in 6 days, but also managed to conquer land from Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. And with time, Israel started to offer more and more strategic gains and advantages to the United States. Israel has got their own intelligence-gathering abilities that are pretty efficient, and they are also funneling a lot of this information back to the US. So, what does Israel get out of this relationship with the US? Well, among other things, a lot of money. Since the Second World War, the United States has given more money to Israel than any other country. Well, to be exact, $260 billion in total. This included economic aid until 2008, but now the U.S. only gives money for military spending. Israel gets $3.8 billion a year as part of a deal signed by President Obama. These American taxpayer dollars have helped Israel build up one of the most powerful militaries in the world, with the latest American fighter jets and an advanced missile defense system called Iron Dome. But one important thing to know about the money given to Israel is that almost all of it has to be spent in the U.S. Another thing about this military aid is the U.S. really doesn't attach any conditions to it, either in terms of how the weapons are used or as a way to pressure Israel on any of its policies, like the way it treats Palestinians, for example. Israel essentially is given a blank check with regard to the military hardware, the technology, the resources that the United States provides. But how do we explain this blank check approach? Well, most of it comes down to domestic U.S. politics. Slate America's sympathy. Let's start by looking at the public opinion on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. There were many public polls conducted since Israel-Palestinians' war. Sympathy for Israelis has consistently polled higher for Palestinians, although the gap's been narrowing a bit recently. Something else to consider is that a big voting constituency in the U.S. are evangelical or born-again Christians. They make up about a quarter of the U.S. population, and they are overwhelmingly pro-Israel. People stating the land of Israel is a land of God, quoting Bible that what is happening, it's an act of God.
It's my obligation to speak out clearly.
There is one other element in U.S. political support for Israel is the influence of pro-Israel lobby groups, like AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Now, there are different thoughts on just how much influence lobby groups like AIPAC actually have in practice. Are they really shaping policies or just promoting policies popular amongst politicians and the public? Whatever may be the case, U.S. leaders certainly pay very much attention.
Hello, AIPAC.
What a remarkable crowd.
It is wonderful to be here and see so many friends.
AIPAC has long been able to direct funds to candidates for office on the basis of that candidate's attitude towards Israel, especially in the House of the Representatives, where, they are running for office every 5 minutes and need a constant flow of money. So now you have got all of these pointers that feed into the U.S.'s relationship with Israel. There's the history, the shared values, strategic interests, religion, political and public interests. All of this has sustained the relationship to the point where some people say it goes pretty much unchallenged. And that's where a lot of criticism comes in, especially from the Israeli-Palestinian war. Well, we don't know if America will ever wake up from this, or as China is saying that the alliance is under pressure. Well, it's hard to say, but events following the Hamas attack on October 7th have put it on full display. But for now, Biden, you cannot keep it hidden.
The United States has Israel's back.
In our next chapter, we'll delve into more such topics of famous people, controversial stories, and heart-wrenching assassinations of popular figures. If this exploration through history resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Date. Until then, let's continue our journey through the pages of the past, where every chapter has a story to tell.